In many workplaces, burnout is commonly misunderstood. It is often framed as a personal issue, something that happens when an individual can no longer manage stress, pressure, or competing demands. Conversations around burnout frequently focus on resilience, mindset, or coping ability, rather than on how pressure is created, distributed, and sustained within systems over time. Because of this framing, burnout is usually expected to appear in obvious and visible ways. Missed deadlines, declining performance, emotional reactions, or disengagement from responsibilities are treated as the primary indicators. When those signals are absent, it is often assumed that everything is fine, or at least stable enough to continue without interruption. But in many cases, burnout does not begin with visible struggle. It does not start with failure or withdrawal. It begins quietly, gradually, and often invisibly. And very frequently, it begins with the people who appear to be performing the best. High performers tend to share a recognizable set of characteristics. They are dependable, consistent, and self-directed. They complete work without constant oversight, adapt quickly when expectations change, and often anticipate problems before others do. Their work creates stability, and their presence reduces friction within systems. Because of these traits, high performers are often trusted more than others. That trust is usually viewed as a positive signal of competence and reliability. Over time, however, it becomes one of the main pathways through which burnout develops. When something urgent arises, high performers are often the first people considered. When a project falls behind schedule, they are asked to step in. When a role is temporarily vacant, when a team is understaffed, or when a process begins to fail, they are relied on to absorb the disruption. Gradually, this reliance becomes habitual rather than situational. This pattern rarely emerges from deliberate planning. Instead, it tends to develop organically in environments that prioritize speed, continuity, and results. The same individuals are chosen repeatedly because they have demonstrated dependability in the past. What feels like a reasonable decision in the moment slowly becomes a structural pattern. As this pattern continues, it begins to shape how work is distributed. Certain individuals carry more responsibility, not because it was formally assigned, but because it feels efficient to place it there. Trust becomes the mechanism through which workload accumulates. In many cases, this accumulation does not happen suddenly. It unfolds gradually, through a series of small additions that feel reasonable at the time. A task is added temporarily. A responsibility is extended for a single project. A problem is assigned because someone is known to handle complexity well. Individually, these additions rarely feel excessive. Each one appears manageable on its own. In some cases, they even feel validating, reinforcing a sense of competence, usefulness, or value. Accumulation does not feel like overload at first. Over time, however, the role begins to expand quietly. The scope grows, expectations shift. What was once occasional becomes routine. What once required extra effort becomes the new baseline. The work increases, but the reference point changes along with it. In many workplaces, these changes are not formally acknowledged. Job descriptions remain unchanged. Titles stay the same. Reporting structures do not adjust. Yet performance expectations continue to rise. The work expands, but the structure does not. Often, added responsibility is framed in positive language. It is described as opportunity, growth, or ownership. This framing makes the increase feel like recognition rather than accumulation. Because of this, it becomes difficult to identify when responsibility has crossed into overload. There is rarely a single moment when someone can clearly say that things became unsustainable. The transition is gradual, and the boundary is unclear. What feels manageable today feels heavier tomorrow, but the change is subtle enough to escape immediate notice. Performance systems often reinforce this dynamic. They measure output, track delivery, and reward consistency. What they rarely measure is capacity. As long as results remain strong, the assumption is that the workload is sustainable. When deadlines are met and metrics look good, concern remains low. The system responds to outcomes, not to the internal cost required to maintain them. Effort, recovery, and strain are largely invisible. High performers also tend to manage pressure internally. When something feels overwhelming, they are more likely to adjust themselves than to raise concerns. They may work longer hours, compress breaks, or sacrifice recovery time to maintain performance. These adjustments often happen quietly. They are not discussed openly. They are not documented formally. They occur outside of meetings, dashboards, and performance reviews. From the outside, nothing appears to change. Output remains consistent. Communication stays professional. Deadlines continue to be met. There are no obvious signs that anything is wrong. This is where burnout often hides. In many cases, the early signs of burnout are subtle and internal. Energy levels dip slightly. Focus requires more effort than it used to. Tasks that were once routine begin to feel heavier, even though the work itself has not changed. Because these changes do not immediately affect performance, they are easy to dismiss. They are often attributed to a busy period, a temporary surge in workload, or external life factors. The assumption is that things will return to normal soon, but the pace does not slow. Expectations remain elevated. The adjustments continue. What was once temporary begins to feel permanent. In many workplaces, support systems are triggered by visible struggle. Missed deadlines, emotional reactions, or clear disengagement are treated as signals that something is wrong. Until those signals appear, concern remains minimal. High performers rarely show these signs early. Instead, they compensate. They expend more internal energy to maintain the same external results. The work continues to get done, but at a higher personal cost. Over time, this creates a widening gap between appearance and experience. From the outside, everything looks stable. Internally, strain continues to accumulate. There is also a perception gap that develops. People who consistently deliver are assumed to be coping well. Silence is interpreted as stability. The absence of complaints is treated as evidence that everything is manageable. When high performers do not voice difficulty, their capacity is assumed to be unchanged. Quiet endurance is mistaken for resilience. The system interprets silence as strength. As this perception solidifies, reliability becomes invisible. The work that keeps systems running smoothly stops being noticed because it is always present. Only disruption draws attention. Only failure becomes visible. Often, high performers take on additional work that is not easily measured. They mentor newer colleagues. They stabilize workflows. They anticipate risks. They prevent problems before they surface. These contributions are valuable, but they are difficult to quantify. Because this work prevents issues rather than reacting to them, its impact remains largely invisible. It becomes noticeable only when it is no longer happening, when systems begin to falter without the quiet effort that once sustained them. At this point, the accumulation of strain continues beneath the surface, setting the stage for longer-term consequences that are rarely connected back to the patterns that created them. In many cases, role expansion continues without corresponding role clarity. Responsibilities increase, but authority does not. Expectations rise, but resources remain the same. The scope of work grows, while the structure around it stays fixed. This imbalance creates sustained strain. Individuals are asked to carry more without being given additional control, time, or support. The system benefits from their effort, but does not adjust to protect their capacity. Over time, this imbalance begins to affect how work feels on a daily basis. Tasks require more effort. Decision-making becomes more draining. Recovery between workdays becomes less complete. The margin for error narrows. As pressure accumulates, the emotional experience of work begins to shift. What once felt engaging begins to feel heavy. What once felt manageable begins to feel exhausting. Satisfaction becomes harder to access, even when outcomes remain positive. Because this change happens gradually, it is easy to rationalize. Fatigue is blamed on a demanding phase. Stress is assumed to be temporary. The expectation is that relief will come later, once the current workload eases. But the demands do not decrease. The elevated baseline becomes normal. Recovery time remains limited. What was once considered unsustainable slowly becomes routine. In many organizations, this erosion goes unnoticed. As long as output remains steady, concern stays low. The system continues to reward results without examining the cost required to maintain them. Over extended periods, this pattern can begin to shape organizational culture. Long hours become normalized. High workload becomes a signal of commitment rather than a warning sign. Over overextension is quietly rewarded. Newer team members observe the behavior of high performers and adjust accordingly. They learn that reliability is demonstrated through availability. They learn that consistency is maintained through personal sacrifice. The cycle reinforces itself through example rather than policy. As this normalization spreads, burnout becomes less of an exception and more of an expectation. It is no longer seen as a failure of systems, but as an inevitable byproduct of demanding work. The underlying causes remain unexamined. Eventually, something begins to shift for the individuals carrying the greatest load. Energy drops enough to affect focus. Errors become more frequent. Tasks take longer to complete. Engagement begins to fade. In many cases, this is the first time burnout is recognized. Performance finally changes in a visible way. What appears sudden is actually the end point of a long, gradual process that went unnoticed for months or even years. At this stage, recovery takes longer. Disengagement is harder to reverse. What looks like a personal breaking point is often the result of a systemic pattern unfolding over time. Organizations may respond by addressing surface-level symptoms. Workloads may be temporarily adjusted. Support may be offered after the fact, but the underlying distribution of pressure often remains unchanged. Without addressing how responsibility accumulates, the cycle continues. New high performers are identified. Trust is placed. Work flows toward the same patterns. The system resets without learning. Burnout among high performers is not about weakness or lack of resilience. It is not the result of individuals failing to cope. In many cases, it reflects environments that equate silence with capacity and consistency with sustainability. When reliability becomes invisible, pressure becomes normalized. The people most depended on become the least noticed. Their endurance is assumed. Their limits are ignored. Over time, this has broader consequences. Teams lose experienced contributors. Institutional knowledge erodes. Stability is disrupted. These outcomes are often treated as isolated problems rather than connected effects. The cost of burnout is rarely immediate. It accumulates slowly, hidden beneath consistent output and apparent stability. By the time it becomes visible, the underlying causes are already deeply established. In this way, burnout is not simply an individual experience. It is a systemic condition shaped by how work is structured, rewarded, and evaluated. The very behaviors that sustain performance in the short term undermine sustainability in the long term. Until systems account for capacity as well as output, burnout among high performers will continue to go unnoticed, not because it is rare, but because it develops quietly beneath the surface of success.